3 times the value of the deposit. So the tenant wises up that the deposit hasn't been registered, firstly. That's not even the main thing. You can register the deposit, fine, so you tick the box, happy, you go on with your normal business, but you haven't given the tenant the prescribed information. That's as bad as not registering the deposit. So let's just look at the steps then quickly. If we just go back, so first step, obviously given the AST, second step you have to register the deposit. Then you've got a choice of obviously using, these are the 3 main schemes we're looking at, so it's the TDS, My Deposits and the DPS. The first 2 are what we call insurance-based schemes, where in the first 2 cases the landlord holds the deposit, so you retain the deposit, but you register the deposit with those 2 schemes. Make sense? Yeah? What we're saying. So the third one is a custodial scheme, the DPS, where the deposit has to be handed over to the company or to the government scheme. Okay, so you literally have to transfer the deposit over to them, and then you get a tenant ID and landlord ID. A bit more difficult to get those funds back. If the tenant absconds, damage to the property, there must be a tenant ID and there must be a landlord ID. So we found in the past that if the landlord wants the deposit, it's quite a cumbersome process to get that back. Okay, because you have to have the ID of the tenant. If the tenant is absconded, you then have to write a letter to the DPS to get that back. So it's not that easy. The first 2, a bit more straightforward. You retain the deposit. You can use a letting agent such as ourselves. This is what Nicholas is doing now. So use us. We've got a segregated client account with client money protection, so we can register the deposits on your behalf. Obviously we retain it, and if there's an inventory, hopefully, we can look at that and then work it out at the end. So the first 2, basically, as we say, you keep the deposit, you've got your own login details, and it's easier to just get that money out at the end. Okay? So just very quickly then, the TDS, as we said, is a government insurance scheme where the landlord holds the deposit. Okay, that's the first one. The second one, My Deposit's also the same. The landlord holds the deposit, very straightforward. And the DPS is a custodial scheme. Yep, question?
I think the DPS has changed. You can have an insurance scheme with the DPS, because I've got one.
Yeah. Okay, so I think, what we have at the moment is we've got a DPS account and we've got a My Deposits account. We tend to still prefer the My Deposits schemes, quite straightforward. The DPS still has a lot of, I wouldn't say politics, but it's just more difficult to get the money out from them. I suppose the change occurred quite recently as well, so I suppose we just have to look back at that as well. Okay, so what's the sequence is important here. So you get the AST done, you register the deposit, then you can go ahead with the next step, which is to give the tenant the prescribed information. It doesn't matter which of the 3 you use. Okay, whether you use the DPS, the TDS, or the My Deposit scheme, the tenant must get the prescribed information. And like we said, it's important that they get this within 30 days. Now, what if you give it to the tenant after about 3 months? If the tenant wises up again, then they can go back and say, well, I haven't received the prescribed information. We've got a case at the moment whereby a tenant has actually signed a My Deposit certificate, and she's put a defence claim into the court to say that I believe my deposit is registered somewhere with a scheme. So this is, I actually got the defence claim through from the landlord, and it says that she believes that there is some deposit registered, but she signed it herself, a My Deposit certificate. So we've got her signature, my signature on the certificate to say that it is registered with the My Deposits. So I don't know what happened if she had brain damage in the meantime. But the bottom line is the certificate is there, and we've got a court hearing on the 22nd of May, and I've got to go present the certificate to the judge to say, here's the certificate. How can the tenant say that she does not know where the certificate was registered? So the paperwork's really important to get that right. Yeah. So and it has to be done within the 30-day period. Yeah. So you have to give that prescribed information. Now, what is prescribed information? Thank goodness the My Deposits have taken it down from 6 pages down to 2 pages. Easier to print, but you can email it as well. Okay. Now, the tenant can come back and say, you've given me some kind of idea of where my deposit is held, but I didn't get the prescribed information. So the My Deposits do not give you any indication on the prescribed information where the tenant can sign. So what we're doing nowadays, we give them the certificate, and at the bottom we say prescribed information received with the certificate, and we sign it. Otherwise they can come back later on and say, oh, I didn't get the prescribed information. What evidence is there we've given it to them within that 30-day period. Yeah, so it can be emailed as well, and that email in their inbox would be a proof as well. Third one, and this is where we are at the moment. Issue a Section 21 if you do want to get rid of the tenant, but you cannot issue a Section 21 unless these things have been done. So this is what we find now, that landlords come to us and say, I'd like to get rid of my tenant. So the first thing we say is, can we see the AST, and can we see the deposit registration certificate? Oops, I've got the AST, but deposit registration certificate? Should I have registered the deposit? Yes, you should have. Because if you don't register the deposit, that cannot take place. So the sequence is important. Yeah? So AST, register the deposit, then issue the Section 21, and then if the tenant is in trouble, if the rent arrears, you can then go ahead with the court procedures and then do the rest of the process really. Okay. What if the tenancy is being renewed? What happens then? If the tenancy is renewed, you have to obviously re-register the deposit because it's a new AST, and you have to pay again. That's how they make their money. If you leave it as it is in a periodic tenancy, what happens then? Anyone have an idea?
You have to renew.
Sorry?
You have to renew.
You have to renew. But what happens in this case? So you renew the AST. When the AST is renewed, you go ahead and you pay another subscription. But it depends. It differs from one scheme to the next. Yeah. But if you leave it as it is, it becomes what we call a statutory periodic tenancy. Okay. So all you then do is you go in and you get this links, and they nowadays send you emails. I think you've got about 30 days once again, or 28 days, I'm not sure. 28 days, I think, to make sure that you go back into your account and then just update the deposit. All that means is you just refresh it kind of, and you don't have to pay for that. But if you forget to do that, as we've done in the past, because you ignore these emails, then the deposit is just cut off completely. And this is why this becomes so important, because if you don't look at your inbox, or you ignore these emails, all of a sudden, you've registered this deposit 6 months ago. It's now become an SPT, so you've left that month, and after month 7, the deposit is no longer registered. What they then do, they send the tenant a letter to say, your deposit is no longer protected. So you've got to make sure that you check these emails, go back in, and it's literally just a click of a button now. In this case, for the SPT, you don't have to pay again. Okay, so you just update it, and it becomes and they'll just renew the deposit. What do you have to do then? You have to then again send the prescribed information and the certificate. Because if you don't do it, it's like not registering the deposit again. Okay? They are, I suppose, knocking us as landlords in this sense that we have to pay all the time, but at least in this case, if we're a bit more alert, then we don't have to pay. Because if it's a statutory periodic tenancy, just renew just update it, and we should be okay. Okay? That's pretty much it. Question?
If I purchase the deposit, print the certificate off, I have it signed, and the 3 months has elapsed,
Yep.
I have to re-register, or can I get them to sign it?
So you've registered the deposit?
I've registered the deposit, print the certificate off, I've got it in a file, but I've never given it to them, I have it signed.
Okay, when the contract was done?
8 months ago?
8 months ago.
Yeah.
So how long was the contract for?
It's 18 months with 12-month break clause.
18 months, yeah? But you've registered the
I've
deposit?
registered it, just haven't got them to sign it yet, or given it to them.
Okay. Have you given them the prescribed information? Do it quickly, very quickly. Just make sure you do it. I mean, for as long as tenants are not, knocking on your door going, oh, you haven't given me the prescribed information, just do it. Just
I sign it and give it to them to keep?
No. What we do is we send them the certificate in a prepaid envelope. So we give it to them, and then we send 2 copies in there. Both are signed by yourself as a landlord, or us as the agent, and then you ask them to send the other copy back to you, so that you have the proof that you've given it to them, plus the prescribed information. My deposits, like I said, it's only got a 2-page document now, which just makes it easier to print, yeah? But just make sure you give it. Okay, no questions asked, nothing said.
Yeah.
Just sign it, bring it back, and make sure you've got a copy of it. Okay? That's me done.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.